Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this new video in which we continue our close reading of Dialectic of Enlightenment by Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer. Today we're going to finish the second excursus, the one in which Theodor Adorno and Max Horkheimer, they criticize Juliette by Le Marquis de Sade, the novel Juliette. And last time we talked about how Sade and also Nietzsche, how they viewed pity. Like they saw pity as just a superstition, a tool for the weak to dominate the strong, a tool for the weak to survive, and so to cheat nature. And so, for them, that's unacceptable, because in nature, it's the strong who should dominate the weak, not the other way around. And so, having pity towards someone is unnatural. It's it's unnatural. It's against nature. And so they also said that it's the same thing with love, for example. That love, like pity, is just a superstition, a way for the weak to dominate the strong. And we are going to continue our discussion about love here, and it's going to be specific to women here. So, like we said last time, Enlightenment viewed love as also a superstition, something that cannot be computed or calculated, and therefore it just made pleasure, because pleasure can be calculated, pleasure became the point and goal of love. And so in this context, everything becomes about sex. Like romantic love is just a metaphysical superstition that veils the real intent behind it, which is sexual pleasure. So like romantic love for Enlightenment is something that dates back to matriarchal ages, which means, ages of obscurantism for Enlightenment. Like in short, men were afraid of women back then. They thought that women had magical powers, and so they were submitted to them. That's why it's called a matriarchy. It's because priestesses were in charge of social life. But as matriarchal societies began to shift towards patriarchal ones, the aversion men had towards women turned into an act of worship. So that even as men became the leaders, they still elevated women to the rank of goddesses. And so romantic love is the worship of women in Christian and patriarchal societies. It is a residue of that fear that men had from priestesses during matriarchal times. So chivalry for Enlightenment makes no sense, because it is an act of fear and or worship, and so it is unnatural. So to quote from Juliette, this is Bellemare talking. Again, Bellemare is the guy who says that love is a dangerous feeling, and so this is from his discourse on love. He says, "It is certain that our spirit of chivalrous courtship, which comically offers our homage to an object made only to satisfy our need, it is certain, I say, that this spirit stems from the reverence our ancestors once had for women because of their profession as prophetesses in town and country. Through terror, aversion became worship, and chivalry was nurtured in the womb of superstition. But this reverence never existed in nature, and it would be a waste of time to seek it there. The inferiority of that sex to ours is too well founded ever to give us a sound motive to respect it, and the love which arises from that blind reverence is, like it, a prejudice." So in other words, for Bellemare, women are naturally inferior to men, and given what we said about the principle of self-preservation and morality, the weak shouldn't receive any help or care from the strong. However, love make men, the superior sex, care about the weak, and so in this sense, love is unnatural. It makes the predator consider the prey as its equal, and thus love, like we said about pity, becomes a weapon for the weak to dominate the strong. Like the social structures created by laws for the sake of order and compassion have the weak's desire for power at its base. Like the weak want as much power as the strong. They are not virtuous at all. They simply veil their true desires through legislation, deliberation, but also love. So everyone wants to treat humans like they treat nature, a means for their ends. The only difference is that the weak cheat, they lie and deceive. And there is a sense of truth in this. We can say that that's why, as the authors say, Christian civilization, which used the idea of protecting the physically weak to justify exploitation of the strong bondsmen, never entirely won the hearts of the converted peoples. Like the converted peoples always felt the presence of power as they were converted by Christianity. Like indigenous people know this. Like Christianity, under the cover of compassion towards the weak, Christian love served the repression of local beliefs and ways of life, like in colonialism, you can see that principle very clearly in colonialism. Like the strong bondsman, that's the slave, who is often portrayed as a brute force of nature. Like the slave is physically stronger than the master, so the master uses his cunning to justify why the strong should work for him. So to protect the physically weak served as a pretext to justify exploitation of the strong bondsman. So even Christians themselves always felt this uncanny ambivalence in their doctrine. Their own love, which exposes and condemns power, was sometimes something that justified power, so it was something that they never really believed in. Like we said in the concept of enlightenment, Christian love is just another step in the thought of enlightenment, since it is indeed an instrument of power. Like it is progress in relation to paganism, and so love was indeed disavowed by the intellectual of Christian masters. So the disavowment of love culminated into Lutheranism, which, quote, abolished the antithesis between state and doctrine by making the sword and rod the gospel's quintessence. It directly equated spiritual freedom with the affirmation of actual oppression. So the meaning of this sentence is this: like Catholics thought that there is an antithesis between state and doctrine. The doctrine is faith, only one really leads you to salvation, and that was faith. And as such, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you have faith, you are worthy to enter the kingdom of God. As long as you love Jesus and thy neighbor, it doesn't really matter what you do. So political affairs don't matter, since the simple act of loving Jesus is enough to make everything right. But Luther and his followers, the Protestants, they disagreed on this. Their skepticism about love alone, as if love has magical powers, led them to say that you cannot have this antithesis. What you do matters as well. It is your works that count, not just your faith. You should love Jesus, but don't think that the love alone will save you. So both the sword, both your duty and works, and the rod, that's the representation of love that make a true Christian. Like love alone was a fairy tale that the Catholic Church used to veil its own lust for power. So the Protestants were like, this love bullshit is utopian. There is no love that is coming to save you. You save yourself. So Luther has a bleak view of the world. Like realists today would say that anyone who believes in things we cannot compute is a dreamer, and as such, only hard work, only suffering makes anyone free spiritually. Only those who spend their whole life breaking their back are truly worthy of the kingdom of God. So the sign that you are on the right path, that you have spiritual freedom, is if you are under some sort of oppression. And so this is no different from what Belmar professes. From his point of view, people who believe in God or in love do not suffer enough. They live in a dreamlike state. They want to shut their eyes from the terrible truth. To be a realist means that you accept to be under someone's boots. So yes, Belmar isn't really wrong when he points to how Christians use love to justify their power. However, he is wrong in thinking that he is any different. Like Belmar simply thinks that he's different because he doesn't rely on metaphysics to justify his superiority. Like his superiority justifies itself. I'm the superior being because I am. So that's my place within the food chain. I am the predator, you are the prey, end of story. So the predator becomes also a victim of suffering. He is a working man who has to go into the wild to struggle to the fullest in order to kill his enemy. So it's the survival of the fittest. The strong accepts his condition as strong, but the weak tries to cheat his way out of this. So the Jews among the Aryans use, bargain and cunning. Women try to escape their faith with love, but why, the strong should protect her at all? Even if women are superior in number, they still the weak sex. So why should they have any say in anything? Like with indigenous people who were colonized also because they lack the advanced technology of the West, women and indigenous people were responsible for their own weakness. You didn't develop enough, so you should be colonized. And so that weakness legitimizes their oppression. You are weak, you are prey, stay in your place, and that's it. Quote, So this is Belmar again. Let us not doubt that there is difference between men and women, no less certain and important than that between men and the apes of the forest. We would have just as good reason to deny women membership of our species as to refuse to acknowledge brotherhood with the apes. Examine carefully a naked woman besides a man of the same age, naked like her, and you will be readily convinced of the considerable difference disregarding the sex which exists between the two creatures, and will clearly see that the woman is merely a lower degree of the man. The differences likewise exist within an anatomical dissection of one and the other, if done with painstaking care, will bring this truth to light. So Enlightenment and its, Christian counterpart are the same in this. They are hatred of women. The only difference is that Christianity tried to compensate that hatred by venerating women, but their veneration is annulled by the hatred against women and against pleasure. Like Christianity's true effect towards women is contempt. Even the love of one's neighbor is a veil of this, contempt towards the other sex. The veneration of the Madonna is a model that women are forced to emulate because the Madonna is an inoffensive woman. The Virgin Mary, it is the antithesis of the prophetess and the witch. Like women's magical powers is a threat to patriarchal system, so they had to be, disenchanted like nature in order to be venerated. And so the fascist adoration for nature is like the Christian adoration for women. It's an adoration based on a mythical image of nature and women, a version that poses no threat and is submissive to men. And so in this, Enlightenment is right. The love that Christian promotes is a veil to power. But since it is a veil, then it is a deception, and only the weak need to deceive. The love of Christianity is truly a contempt, but a contempt that is not admitted. Thus, it is the contempt of the weak. And hence, Enlightenment reverts the whole story. It's not women who are oppressed by Christian love. Christian love is an invention of women intent the heart of their real and legitimate oppressors, which are men. That's what the whole point of love is. It is, to make men docile so that they don't hurt women. So Enlightenment denies Christian love not because it wants to liberate women, but because they want to submit women even further. So the union of the two hearts in marriage, for example, is seen as an attempt from the woman to convince the man to protect her and worship her. And so this is what two other characters from Juliet say. I have never believed, say Count Gigi, the Roman chief of police, that the union of two bodies could ever give rise to the union of two hearts. I see in this physical union strong reasons for contempt, for revulsion, but not a single one for love. And when Agur, terrorized by Saint Fons, the royal minister, burst in tears, he exclaims, that is how I like women. Why cannot I reduce them all to such a state with a single word? So that's how it is. The rejection of love as metaphysical superstition by Enlightenment is actually a continuation of that love. It is another step in the subjugation of women and by extension nature, which becomes more and more direct through history. So women are denied their individuality because their individuality is mimetic. Like women bring back nature, and that is something that patriarchal Enlightenment don't want. Like we said, Enlightenment hates mimesis. So they impose another model for women to mimic. Like we said, Enlightenment is when the subject wants to decide on mimesis and not let nature decides on mimesis. Mimesis, it's to mimic, in case you forgot. So we replace the individuality of women, and by extension also the individuality of men, with pseudo-individuality, with stereotypes and cliches that we are forced to reproduce in the name of authenticity. The Madonna, the trad wife, are cliches that women are told is their true identity. So because Christian love is after the control of mimesis, it is bound to reproduce what it was trying to avoid. The power of nature that traumatizes humans is reproduced within civilization. And so it is only giving a human face. So Christian love is nature's, mimesis made more direct and brutal, but painted with the Madonna's appealing features. So hence Christianity's attempt at civilization, its project of establishing a society of neighborly love and protection for the weak, was bound to fail. It failed because it didn't get rid of the, quote, desperate destructive urge directed against everything which embodies the lure of nature, everything which is physiologically, biologically, nationally, or socially inferior. So it only sublimated them, gave them a human face, which of course, legitimizes them even further. When destruction has the face of the Madonna, then no one has to shy away from destruction, right? We can keep, denaturing nature and women and even men while feeling good about it. So in the obsessive fear of relapsing into nature, in the obsessive, attempt to destroy that desire or attempt to go back to nature, to the Song of the Sirens, to magic, to matriarchal past, we create barbarism. Civilization fails because in this attempt to avoid relapse into nature, it creates the barbarism that it is running from. So this, according to Adorno and Horkheimer, is called the other side of culture. Like barbarism is not opposed to culture, but it is its other side. So civilizations to do their thing, to subjugate nature, it requires culture. But if civilization reproduces barbarism on a wider scale, then barbarism is also culture. You can say that the human face is culture. Like barbarism with a human face is barbarism painted with culture. Customs, rituals, beliefs, art, sciences, architecture, etc. for Adorno and Horkheimer were the painted face of the barbarism that was taking place within the walls of civilization. So behind the culture that humanity builds to hide its barbaric ways stand the desires to destroy all things. Quote, them all, for destruction tolerates no exception. The will to destroy is totalitarian, and totalitarianism springs from that will alone. I have reached the point, Juliet tells the Pope, where I can say with Tiberius, if only the whole of mankind had only one head, so that I could have the pleasure of cutting it off with a single blow. So Tiberius was the second Roman emperor after Augustus. I don't know if he ever said that about mankind, that he wished that it had one head to cut it off, but it's consistent with his character. He was a tyrannical and paranoid emperor, always believing that there are plots to overthrow him. So yeah, he would say something like that. But anyways, the point is clear, I guess. Culture is the veil of the lust of murder towards the weak, the powerless toward animal fears, etc. Like the signs of weakness provoke the lust of murder. That's the point. So it is women's fault to be submissive because their weakness provoke their domination. So just by being women, they provoke the desire to cut their heads with one blow. And so likewise, all cultures need to build themselves on a scapegoat, someone who represents weakness. The role of a scapegoat is to legitimize culture by being its sacrifice. So Western civilization found its scapegoat in women, but it was also the Jews, according to Adorno and Horkheimer. Jewish people and women manifested weakness in its purest form. The explanation of the hatred of women as the weaker in mental and physical power, who bears the mark of domination on her brow, is the same as for the hatred of the Jews. Women and Jews show visible evidence of not having ruled for thousands of years. So the fact that they never ruled for thousands of years, but have been ruled by others during those thousands of years, is the rule of their the proof of their weakness, and thus it legitimizes their domination. Legitimizes their submission, but their domination by men. Like they bear the mark of domination, as they say, and it infuriates the strong. It's like it's like Madara in Naruto, who complains about weakness. Like weakness disgustes me. That's. Madara finds weakness disgusting. So that's the idea. The weak only provokes the fury of the strong that unleashes that the strong unleashes on them. These senseless creatures, write President Blamont of Women in Aline and Valcourt, How I love to see them struggling in my hands. They are like lambs in the jaws of the lion, and in the same letter, it is the same as conquering a city. You must occupy the heights, establish yourself at all the commanding points, and then launch your attack without any fear of resistance. So, Aline and Valcourt is another novel by Le Marquis de Sade, and you cannot get more explicit than that, right? Like literally the dude is saying that women are prey, and just for that they must be conquered. Like weakness like in nature attracts predators. So why should it be different between humans? So the weak deserve their persecution, their humiliation, their oppression, and the strong, more importantly, deserve their joy and pleasure in inflicting pain on the weak. So the strong must be safe from the weak. Right? They must encounter no resistance and fear no resistance from their prey. So the weaker and powerless and more powerless the prey is, the greater the pleasure for the predator. Power becomes pleasure when it can finally, revoke discipline. When the predator finally knows that the prey cannot threaten it, and so then discipline is abandoned. Like the predator doesn't have to hold back anymore. Predators who follow rules and discipline mean they are not yet confident in their domination over nature. In discipline, we suppress nature. When a child lacks discipline, it means he has no control over his impulses, so nature is still controlling him. So being childish and womanish means unable to master your impulses and drive. So nature is still in control here. So in discipline, fear from nature is still existence. So if the predator endorses discipline, it means that it is still vulnerable to the power of the prey, of the power of nature. Once the prey is guaranteed never to pose a threat to the predator, however, the predator can finally let go. It doesn't have to bother with discipline anymore. He can do what nature was doing all along without risking to lose his sense of self. He can now abandon discipline without fearing to be tempted by nature. It's like Odysseus. Odysseus reaches a point where that he doesn't need to be tied to the boat when he listens to the sirens. He can listen to the sirens and rejoice with a triumphant gaze that their songs cannot affect him. So here, the violence that the predator inflicts on the prey is without limits. The predator has no limits, has no reason to restrain himself anymore. And so when discipline is no longer needed, the evil laugh is heard. Villains, they laugh when they are confident that they are untouchable. That they know the hero cannot abort their plan or thwart their plans. Now they can go all the way without having to pretend anymore. So civilization is, of course, discipline on a wider scale. Now that fear has left the predator's heart, he doesn't need civilization anymore. He can be, the animal that he always wanted to be, the lion that tears the lamb apart. Fear averted from the self bursts out in hearty laughter, the expression of a hardening within the individual which can only be fully lived out through the collective. Ringing laughter has always denounced civilization. So the individual has hardened himself enough so that it won't be affected by fear or any other effects, and now he can laugh to his heart's content. But laughter is, as they say, only lived through the collective. What this means is that this laughter is the sign that he is without identity. He is, indistinguishable from any other individual. The laughter becomes collective, and so no voice can be identified in that collective. Which makes the whole thing absurd. The whole project of enlightenment, which is self-preservation, preserving one's identity, ends up with a bunch of people laughing together, thinking that they made it, when no one has actually an identity of their own, and they are just killing everyone and everything around them. So hence, collective laughter denounces civilization in this sense of showing its true face. Like laughter distorts the human face, showing how keen it is to animals, and hence it exposes that civilization is just a facade for barbarism and savagery. Laughter is the destructive expression of civilization that triumphs as it is collapsing. And so Adorno and Horkheimer, they quote from Victor Hugo's famous novel L'homme qui rit, the man who laughs. It's about a man named Gwynplaine, I think that's how it is pronounced, who has, a mutilated face and looks like he's always laughing. And by the way, the character of the Joker from Batman was actually inspired from that character. Well, more specifically, it was inspired from the 1928 film adaptation by Paul Lenny. I mean, like, read the novel or watch the movie. It's a silent film, but it's a beautiful story. So anyway, so the mutilated face of Gwynplaine represents the mutilated and absurd life of the 17th century. The story takes place in the 17th century, but Hugo was talking about his own time, the 19th century, and about inequalities between rich and poor. So the face of Gwynplaine signifies that, civilization is a farce, that man hasn't outgrown his animalistic tendencies. So the inequalities between people prove it well enough that civilization and jungle are no different. So the whole idea of civilization is a joke, and laughter represents that joke, that reality of pain and violence. Quote, of all the lava spewed forth from the crater of the human mouth, the most calamitous is merriment, writes Victor Hugo in the chapter headed Storms of Men are worse than storms of oceans. So merriment means laughter, and it is compared to the most calamitous lava and a storm of men, like the power of the collective that goes wild, that lets go of discipline and laugh together, causes more suffering, wreaks a bigger havoc than nature itself, than natural disasters, than fucking tsunamis. So laughter legitimizes the pleasure we get from hurting others, and so Juliet says the same thing. It is on misfortune, Juliet teaches, that the full weight of our malice must fall. The tears wrung from wretchedness have a keenness which profoundly thrills our nervous substance. So malice must fall on misfortune means that it is on the poor, on the weak, that the strong sadist desires and drives must fall. So the misfortune must be the receivers of the strong's blows. And yes, she's actually saying that she gets off from other people's tears and suffering. When she hurts others, she gets a profound thrill. Yes, she's literally saying that she hurts just for fun, like the other American psychopath that we mentioned last time. So hence, nothing can provide pleasure if it is not also about inflicting pain on someone else. It is only in sadism that we can feel pleasure, only through domination. So there is no such thing as tenderness. It is just a chimera invented by the weak to survive and subvert the natural hierarchy. Quote, rather than with tenderness, pleasure makes its pact with cruelty, and sexual love becomes about, according to Nietzsche, it always was in its means war, and at its basis the mortal hatred of the sexes. With both the male and the female, zoology teaches us love's or sexual attraction is originally and preeminently sadic. It is positively gratified by the infliction of pain. It is as cruel as hunger. Thus, as its final result, civilization leads back to the terrors of nature. So the Nietzsche's quote is from the Wagner case, and the second quote is from an anthropologist, Robert Briffaut, who wrote a book in 1927 called The Mothers. And the passage is quite explicit. When you have sex or when you love, which here is equated, you are supposed to inflict pain. There has to be a hierarchy and dominance. Sex is only enjoyable in cruelty, like in the animal kingdom. So, like, I let you imagine what the implications would be for consent. Like, consent in this worldview would be another superstition, like a bargain invented by the weaker sex to make herself the equal of the superior sex. So yes, for Sade, there is nothing wrong with rape. So as long as it is the strong who rapes, there is nothing wrong with it, apparently. So when the strong rapes, it is natural. When it is the weak, it is further proof that they are weak and cannot contain themselves. They cannot control their drives and desires. So you can see it today with the reactions to when it is a white man who raped someone, to when it is when it is a black or an immigrant who raped or sexually assaulted someone. When it is a white man, like we try to justify it you know, but when it is like he had a bad day, or you know, maybe things were not really really that explicit between him and the woman. But when it is an immigrant or a black man who rapes, it is, you know, well, it is proof that these people shouldn't be among us, that these people are savages, animals, etc. So this is how the Nazis treated others. The principle of rape was applied shamelessly to all those considered inferior. Everyone despised for their weakness was basically asking for it, whether it is, you know, actual rape or mugging or Auschwitz. The Nazis turned Saad's lethal love into a reality. They actually believed that such state of affairs shouldn't remain just in imagination, in fiction, or in theory. They believe that existence is only fulfilled in the cruelty of Saad's novels, and as such, they actually planned the destruction that they produced. German fascism wasn't just a mistake; it was planned and desired. It was consciously designed and intentionally brought about. It was intentionally brought about. You know, I mean, the Germans intentionally wanted that. You know, humanity wanted that. You know, it's like you had three levels of this reality's fulfillment. First, you had it in imagination and theory in Saad and Nietzsche. Then it started to actualize itself through capitalism. But capitalism doesn't really have a goal. It's just a system that is not, you know, conscious of what it is doing. So its destruction is more random and arbitrary. So it wasn't really efficient or rational. But then the Nazis were like, hey, how about we destroy everything but efficiently? Like, it means that how about we come up with ways to make sure that we destroy and inflict the most possible pain. And so the Nazis did that. They optimized the destructive process of capitalism. They turned it into a planned economy specifically designed to destroy everything in its path. Whereas the unconscious colossus of real existence, subjectless capitalism, inflicts its destruction blindly. The deludedly rebellious subject is willing to see that destruction as its fulfillment, and together with the biting cold it emits toward human beings misused as things, it also radiates the perverted love which, in the world of things, takes the place of love in its immediacy. So the deluded rebellious is, of course, the Nazi. He thinks that he's rebelling against the system, but he's like, you know, the edgy, cringe right-wing incel who thinks that he is, you know, hardcore whenever he makes a stupid comment on woke ideology. Like, he is delusional, and so he is asking for chaos. He sees chaos as, you know, the state in which existence is the most fulfilled. And in this existence, people are reduced to things. Like, the entire world is reduced to things now that it is, you know, disenchanted. The existence that the delusional rebel seeks is a world of things, and in it he can experience the lethal love that Saad focuses on. So since it is a love based on direct domination, it is a love of immediacy. Like, the predator directly hurts its victim, like, firsthand. Violence occurs like it occurs on women in domestic violence. In the home, women experience the lethal love when they are mistreated and abused by their delusional husbands. This is taken, you know, to be the normal state of things. This is how, you know, the world should be according to the delusional rebel. His sickness, his delusion becomes the norm. It sees that it is okay to look at women, Jews, and others as objects. Quote, sickness becomes the symptom of recovery. In transfiguring the victim's delusion accepts their degradation. It makes itself resemble the monster of domination, which it cannot physically overcome. Imagination seeks as horror to withstand horror. So in the end, it prescribes a parody of order without even realizing how absurd the delusion is and how contradictory they are behaving. On the other hand, they lust for order, and on the one hand, they lust for order. On the other, they plan for chaos. So enlightenment is therefore suffering from what is called tragic irony. This is not in the book, but it's a good way to understand it. Like, tragic irony is when someone is doing something that he believes to be one thing, while it is doing the opposite, and he's not seeing it. It's like when someone criticizes a group of people for doing something, and then that person does the same thing while being, confident that he is not doing what he criticized other people for doing. So enlightenment doesn't see that it is doing the same thing that it blames the weak to do, which is creating chaos, being irrational, worshipping idols, etc. It's like when monotheist religions blame paganism for worshipping idols, but then the Abrahamic religions do the same with their one God and behave in ways more barbaric than the pagans that they criticize. In the case of love, it's the same thing. For enlightenment, for reason, love is another idol. The devotion to women is idol worship, no different from pagan ignorance. By being devoted to women, men are being deceived, and it's a sad sight for the sadist. So it's a world turned on its head. Like normally men shouldn't be devoted or adore inferior creatures. That is chaos for the sadist. When the strong worships the weak, that is chaos for the strong or for the sadist. It is the equivalent of blasphemy in the eyes of Jews, Christians, or Muslims. And so it is the same as Satanism, where people forget about worshiping God and go worship the devil instead, or when they follow false gods or follow false prophets. It is a call to ruin. So enlightenment is thus the secularized form of monotheism. It is an attack on all forms of idolatry and thus mythology. But that's precisely what myth is doing, and therefore enlightenment doesn't see that it itself is myth disguised as reason. So since enlightenment blames myth and religion for trying to disguise superstition as something rational, all the way down to metaphysics, and enlightenment is doing what myth and religion were doing, then enlightenment too is disguising superstition as something rational. So enlightenment starts destroying itself while thinking that it is attacking superstition. It doesn't see its tragic irony because it ignores how similar it is to mythology. The decay of economic reality, which has always been at the basis of superstition, released specific forces of negation. And so this sentence, I think, sums it all. When societies crumble, that's when superstitions are likely to emerge. When crops are bad, and when there is a plague, when there is an earthquake, etc., people would try to explain it with the anger of the gods or curses and shit. So they start looking for culprits and scapegoats. Someone must have infuriated the gods. Whomever did it must have done it because of some superstition. They had the wrong belief or some shit like that. So the plague is caused by the worshipping of an idol, by the worshipping of a false god, or the wrong god. So in short, someone strayed away from the right path. And so we need to find who was worshipping that idol. And so when shit goes down, the forces of negation are released. We are going to negate the false belief, the myth, the superstition. But people negate myth with myth. They bring in another idol to destroy the former idol. In modern day, the idol to destroy the other idols is reason. When shit goes down, when the economy crumbles, when you have unemployment and poverty, you have the same pattern. Someone must have done the wrong thing. They must have the wrong values. So in other words, someone is devoting themselves to the wrong people. So if Germany was in the state it was after World War I, it's because we don't have real men anymore, because the weak have corrupted us. So we must get rid of superstition in order to have our strong country back. But that too is a superstition. Like, indeed, the economic reality of Germany is giving rise to superstition, which is, it is the weak who are responsible for this. Like, that is the superstition. So the Nazis are the superstitious one, but they don't see it. Just like, the priest who condemns the witch when there is an epidemic, for example. So the priest condemns, those who worship idols as lacking discipline, as being, under the influence of affects, while ignoring that his own beliefs are also the product of the same affects and the same fear. And so it's the same thing here with the Nazis. They don't want love to affect them. They pretend that they are stoic and don't follow passion, but their reason is no different and follows the same pattern. So it abolishes an idol to replace it with another. And so reason becomes the idol of Enlightenment, which of course has to be destroyed too. In the evolution of iconoclasm, the practice of destroying idols, perhaps its peak was with Christianity. The authors seem to imply that there is a curve. Like first you had mythology, so paganism, then Judaism comes along and starts imposing monotheism. It destroys the idols worshipped by the Canaanites, but it brought its own idol, Yahweh. And so then the Christians come in and they destroy that idol too by making it something universal and not just specific to Jews. The universal love of Jesus engulfs every human being, if not, every creature. Quote, Christianity, however, propagated love, the pure adoration of Jesus. It sought to elevate the blind sexual drive by the hollowing of marriage, as it also tried to bring the crystalline radiance of law closer to earthly life by the idea of heavenly grace. Like, we know that Yahweh, for example, is a vengeful God, a merciless God. Often when people complain about how God is a dick in the Bible, they often point to the Old Testament. In the New Testament, God is more loving and forgiving, as in, to highlight that the Jews were still living in superstition. Like their God is more violent than the Christian version and lacks tenderness. So Jesus is more about equality, about bringing everyone to the same heavenly grace. So there is a reconciliation between heaven and earth, between the strong and the weak, which is absent according to the authors from Judaism and Enlightenment. When Enlightenment comes, the loving element in God is revoked, which brings us back to the state of the Old Testament. The reconciliation of civilization with nature, which it sought prematurely to purchase with the doctrine of the crucified God, remained as alien to Judaism as to the rigorism of the Enlightenment. Neither Moses nor Kant proclaimed emotion. Their icy law knew neither love nor sacrificial pyres. So when Enlightenment attacks love as a superstition, it reverts back to an older stage while proclaiming that it is progressing. It is ignorant of the similarities between it and the regressive stages of history according to its own doctrine. So not only it is regressing, making Christianity more advanced than it is, but it also does the same thing to all iconoclasts before it. It replaces the God of Christianity by another more violent, stoic, and uncompromising than the God of the Old Testament. And so this God is Nietzsche's Overman. The Overman, the Superman, or the Übermensch in German, is a concept in Nietzsche's philosophy, which is basically when someone who no longer denies his will to power and creates their own values. This is, someone who is greater than nature, bigger than nature, or bigger than life. Quote, while he repudiated the law, he plunged himself to the higher self, a self no longer natural, but more than natural. He wanted to replace God by the Overman because monotheism in its broken Christian form had transparently become mythology. So the Overman is someone who doesn't feel anything from nature and therefore doesn't succumb to mythology. Again, this is Adorno and Horkheimer's reading of Nietzsche. Many would find this, weird if they know Nietzsche in relation with feelings and Stoicism. So keep in mind that this is a particular reading. Anyway, so for Nietzsche, the Overman doesn't need religious beliefs because religious belief is a sign of weakness, that we are not able to stand to nature and cannot counter its effects on us. So in Nietzsche, the Overman is someone who surpasses nature. Hence the Nietzschean paradox that on the one hand he criticizes metaphysicians and theologians for their hidden, worlds, the world that are beyond nature. He sees that those are speculation and superstition that are caused by their weakness. But on the other, he wants his self to be more than natural. The difference would be that Nietzsche would conquer nature. He goes beyond it through a fair fight, whereas the metaphysician and the theologian, they would deny nature. So again, they cheat while Nietzsche takes on the effects of nature and simply beats them. And so as such, the Übermensch, the beater of nature, let's call it, becomes the new god of enlightenment. He just, extols the asceticism of Christianity. When Nietzsche talks about overcoming yourself, he is not saying something very different from monks and priests. He is after power, after domination, like the Christians he criticized, but he is more legit, I guess, because he says that he's not cheating. And so, as they say, the higher self turns out to be a desperate attempt to rescue the God who was dead. So, but now the self wants to be that God. Over the Superman is seeking to take the empty place left by the corpse of God. It wants to be an automatic being that is self-sufficient, that obeys no rules, but no rules other than his own. Obeys no will other than his own will. So the divine law is replaced by an autonomous principle. In this way, Nietzsche and Kant are the same. They are both looking for how to turn themselves into despotic machines. That way, European civilization will be saved. Like, civilization is crumbling, and that scares the shit out of the civilized men, because they see that they will be the prey again in real nature. So the strong are the strong only in civilization. That's why they always blame the weak and try so hard to maintain their dominance over them. If the weak, are giving equal rights, then the strong believe civilization will crumble, and they will return to the realm, to the actual state of nature, with wild beasts, harsh weather, constant fear, etc. So they turn to reason because if everything is justified by reason, it reassures them. So they are looking for a world that runs by machines, because when it is a machine that is taking care of everything, human beings are relieved. Machines don't make mistakes because they experience no fear, they have no emotions, so they only follow reason. They don't feel guilt, they don't doubt their knowledge, etc. So that's what the Overman is. It's an autonomous principle, a self-sufficient machine, and this is what it also means to be mature for Kant. So both Nietzsche's Overman and Kant's maturity are the same thing. Kant's principle that everything be done from the maxim of one's will as a will that could at the same time have as its object itself as giving universal law is also the secret of the Overman. His will is no less despotic than the categorical imperative. Both principles aim at independence from external powers and the unconditional freedom from tutelage, which defines the essence of enlightenment. So neither are actually liberating us from power and authority, but submitting us to an even more totalitarian, impersonal, despotic power. So to think by and for yourself doesn't stem from the desire to be free, but from the fear of being wrong. It's not we don't want authority to tell us what is true. It's that we are actually looking for the highest authority to tell us what is true. So the phrase "dare to know, dare to use your own reason," the free thinker is more despotic and totalitarian and authoritative than religious authority. What we are concerned with is not freedom here, but it is to avoid errors. We don't want to be in falsehood, because, well, falsehood are mythologies and idols, we hate those things because they are wrong, and wrongness in this case means death. It means weakness, it means emotions, it means to return to the state of nature, so it means barbarism. But as the authors point, when we are this much afraid of falsehood, then even truth won't matter to you. There is no truth for someone who is so much scared of being wrong. Like, the obsession over truth makes you see everything as a lie. Like, people who are paranoid are people who are obsessed with the truth, that they are so obsessed in the truth that they believe nothing. Like, here's a passage that really sums it up, and it's about Nietzsche again. As the fear of falsehood, a fear which even in his most enlightened moments Nietzsche described as a piece of Quixotism, replaced the law with self-legislation, so that everything was made transparent as one great unmasked superstition. Enlightenment itself, indeed, truth in any form, became an idol, and we realized that even we, knowing ones of today, the godless and anti-metaphysical, still take our fire from the conflagration kindled by a belief millennia old, the Christian belief, which was also the belief of Plato, that God is truth, that the truth is divine. Science itself, therefore, is open to the same criticism as metaphysics. The denial of God contains an irreversible contradiction. It negates knowledge itself. So the quoted passage from Nietzsche is from his famous gay science, or the joyful wisdom, depending on the translation. The one used here is from the Jewish the joyful wisdom, and it's Thomas Common's translation. It's the aphorism 344. So it is called to what extent even we are still pious. So basically, for Nietzsche, philosophers and experts, scientists, theologists, whatever you have, all claim to have a all claim that they are driven by a will to truth. A will to find the truth, that all of their knowledge and theories are driven by the desire to get to the truth. But for Nietzsche, that is bullshit. There is no such thing as a will to truth. There's only a will to power for Nietzsche. Whenever someone tells you, I am telling you the truth, he acts humble and objective, like he's disinterested. He's not looking for power or domination over you, but in reality, that's what he's after. He's after power and domination. His truth is not disinterested. He takes it as truth because he only takes it as truth when it is aligned with his interests and desires. So looking for the truth is again a sign of weakness here. It's people who cannot dominate you directly, so they will look for some other way to do it. Truth, therefore, is a superstition for Nietzsche. So those who claim to be objective, the enlightenment of science, are no different from Don Quixote. Don Quixote, as you know, is a character from the novel by Cervantes. It's about a dude who thinks he's a knight and goes on self-giving missions to fight evil, like in medieval novels. He is, of course, delusional, and at one point he fights windmills, thinking that they are giants. And for Nietzsche, scientists are no different. In that sense, they act like priests. They take their knowledge, science, to be like scriptures, and see in it a virtue. So we are still pious, we are still religious if we believe in truth. We are not objective, we have just deified truth and made it divine. And so that's why he mentions Plato, because for Plato, God and truth are the same thing. We worship truth, and as such we are delusional. We take truth like Don Quixote takes the windmills. We see them as giants, as so another form of animism, and we see truth as divine. So for Nietzsche, there can be only falsehood. Anything that comes his way must be false from the start. So yeah, the end result is that even science is metaphysical. Knowledge itself is negated, as we said in the quote. So the gay science for Nietzsche is a science, against truth and knowledge. The kind of science that Nietzsche wants is a science that doesn't aim at truth, but recognizes everything as falsehood. So this is not really what Sade aimed at. He didn't apply the criticism to science. He didn't reach the moment where science turns on itself, but nothing was stopping him from taking that extra step. Like Sade stopped at religion and social bonds and institutions, like solidarity with society, the family, the office, etc. All of those were mere superstitions for Sade. So he stopped at chaos and anarchy, but what he did was revealing the real mythological nature of the principles on which civilization was founded. It was, quote, those of the Decalogue of paternal authority, of property. It is the exact inversion of the social theory elaborated by Le Play 100 years later. So these were the real drives behind civilizations. Those who are weak gave them human faces. They painted them with mythological speculation, such as faith and love, so as to have access to them. It's an inversion of Le Play theory, because Frédéric Le Play was a French anthropologist, and in 1855 he published a book called Les Ouvriers Européens. It's actually a series of books, and it is an exploration of how the European working class is living. And in the 5th chapter of the first volume, he talks about what makes a society healthy and happy, and he actually gives those 3 elements as a prerequisite for a functioning society. People need to have, property in order to be free and autonomous. They need to have families, and then you need decalogues. So the decalogues is like, rules of conduct that are held in high esteem. It's like the 10 Commandments, for example. They are for Le Play necessary elements for the happiness happiness of society, but Sad thinks the opposite. For him, happy societies are actually the direct opposite of this. Decalogues are superstitions that the weak Jews invented so as to give themselves authority over the strong. And so likewise with property and paternal authority, they give themselves property so that they don't let the strong transform the earth. Paternal authority inhibits youth, preventing it to enjoy and fulfill life's goals. So these principles are principles of decaying old people. They are principles of death and not of life. Hence, they are completely irrational and unjustifiable since they lead to self-annihilation, and we want a principle that leads to self-preservation. But you know what is justifiable? Well, murder. Yes, Sad actually thinks that you can justify murder, but you can never justify condemning murder. You can justify throwing away your kids, but not nurturing or caring for them. You can justify betrayal, but you can never justify loyalty. So for Sad, the Decalogue, but also, morality as a whole, is not like saying that religion is superstition because people are moral, so they don't need religion to be moral. No, he's saying that morality altogether and any form of attachment or bond that you have with others, even with your own children, is superstitious. Like the commandments, for example, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, etc., are for Sad just pure ideology that has no ground whatsoever in reason or logic. Like Juliet even made the Pope try to justify why murder is condemned, and he couldn't do it. He ended up, arguing for murder. Quote, he finds it easier to rationalize unchristian acts in the light of natural reason than it had ever been to justify the Christian principles according to which those acts were devilish. The Mithrid philosopher has less need of sophistry in advocating murder than Maimonides and Saint Thomas Aquinas in condemning it. So actually arguments for murder are easier to make than ones to condemn murder. Maimonides was a Jewish medieval philosopher. He's actually the one who brought the works of Aristotle and Plato to the Muslim world, and Saint Thomas Aquinas was one of the greatest thinkers of medieval theology in Europe. So what Sad is implying is that those who try to condemn murder will provide arguments that are filled with fallacies and inconsistencies and ad hoc theories than someone providing arguments in favor of murder. And so likewise, you cannot argue for love either. Any kind of love or affection is just simple idolatry. Humanity itself becomes an idol too that reason has exposed. No love can withstand reason, neither that between wife and husband, nor between lover and beloved, nor the love between parents and children. So another character of the libertine society imagined by Sade, le Duc de Blangis, openly advocates for the harsh treatment of the wives and daughters of rulers. They must be treated harsher than outsiders to emphasize even more the denial of bonds. Like, the closer you are to me, the more violent I have to be with you. And so I have to treat my wife and my daughter in the worst possible ways I can imagine. Even I do the same to someone unrelated to me. It is my closest relatives that I must hurt the most. Quote, those related to the rulers, daughters and wives should be treated as harshly, indeed still more harshly than others, in order to show you how deeply we despise the bonds by which you may think us fettered. So, Dormans, a character we mentioned last time, condemns parental love, saying that parents should have no feelings, no love towards their kids, especially, their daughters, since they are weaker than their sons. So the real reason for these feelings, he argues, is just, because the parents want someone to take care of them when they are old. If parents didn't have that fear of old age, they won't give a shit about their kids. These latter ties originate in the parents' fear of being abandoned in old age, and the self-interested concern they show for us in our childhood is intended to earn them the same consideration in old age. So in other words, the real reason why we should, we would treat our children in a good way, it isn't out of love or care, but because we are expecting something in return. That when we are old, we won't be abandoned and we would still rule over them. So Adorno and Horkheimer mentioned Democritus, the pre-Socratic philosopher, who made a similar claim to highlight that his line of reasoning is as old as the oldest bourgeoisie. They refer to the fragment 278 in Deals. So the pre-Socratics are philosophers who taught before Socrates. Democritus is among the last one, and he shouldn't really be considered a pre-Socratic since he is younger than Socrates by 10 years, but he's often grouped with them. And the pre-Socratics left no complete writing. We only have fragments of their work, and Democritus has the most well-preserved work among all of them, because we have so many fragments from Democritus. And so in the fragment 278, he says that people like animals have children because it is just natural. To beget offsprings is what every living creature does. But at the end of the fragment, he adds that while the begetting of kids is natural, treating them with love and care is actually out of interest. We expect some advantage back from our offsprings. Parental love is purely economic for Democritus, and has been ever since for the bourgeoisie. So love is just a transaction for the bourgeoisie. We only care and nurture our children because we expect something back when we are old. And we can even say, well, why stop there? Why should we stop at murder, steal, and rape? How about incest? Well, for Sade, the prohibition of incest is to a superstition. Why should we be forced to have sex with people outside the family? Why should we be forced to do exogamy? Exogamy means that you have a relationship outside of one's circle, either family or clan. So Adorno and Horkheimer argue that exogamy is the foundation of civilization. Since in civilization we make bounds with people who are precisely not related to us, civilization starts when tribalism is transcended, precisely. But now, Sade is actually advocating for a radical regress. The guy is for in-group breeding. He even argues that science hasn't proven that incest leads to retarded kids. Like the authors mention an archaeologist who was very famous in the 19th and 20th century, Salomon Reinhardt. He was French, and he published an essay on incest where he basically says that there is nothing wrong with it scientifically speaking. And so this is from his essay. It is quoted in the book. It has by no means been proven that children born of incest have a greater tendency than others to suffer from cretinism, deaf muteness, rickets, etc. The essay is called La prohibition de l'inceste et le sentiment de pudeur, so the prohibition of incest and the feeling of being a prude. So he argues, and this is from the first page of the essay actually, that as long as there are no predispositions to get mental diseases, there is no reason to prevent a brother and a sister from having sex together. So the prohibition of incest, he argues, stems from a feeling that it is gross, from a moral feeling that cannot be justified on rational grounds, than from actual science. The essay is compiled in a book called Culte, Mythe et Religion, which you can find online for free if you are interested. So Sade seems to be on board with this, like you cannot prohibit incest on reasonable grounds. But on the other hand, it's not, Sade is not for the imposition of incest either, because incest would mean that we stay within our families, that we stay closed off and isolated, and that's not good. But the reason that is not good for Sade isn't probably the one you are thinking of. He says it's not good because in families you have a lot of maternal love going around there. So if children stay isolated in their families, they can be exposed to maternal love, and they can be exposed to tenderness, and that will make them weak. So the only thing that will save exogamy is that staying too close to your mother and sisters will make you a pussy. Quote, do not imagine you will make good Republicans as long as you isolate children, who should belong only to the whole community within your families. Whereas there are great disadvantages in allowing children to be absorbed into family interests, which often diverge strongly from those of the nation, very great benefits lie in separating them from them. So it is for the sake of society that we must destroy all kinds of bonds. Yeah, that makes sense. You can see the fascist totalitarian ideology coming up. The reason why children shouldn't be too involved with their families is so that they all become the children of the nation. Sade even advocates that kids don't know that kids shouldn't know who their father is, so that they will be the kids of the whole community. But this is not to promote equality or mutual respect, but the opposite. It is to establish an authoritarian state that controls everything and protects the strong so that they can hurt the weak in all safety. So in the end, the bourgeoisie turns itself into a state, and there the fascist state is born. You prohibit all kinds of love, all kinds of bonds, so that people have no other authority but the cold, harsh, artificial state. Quote, conjugal ties must be destroyed for social reasons. Children are to be absolutely forbidden knowledge of their fathers, since they are uniquement les enfants de la patrie. The anarchy and individualism which Sade proclaimed in the struggle against laws culminate in the absolute rule of the generality, the republic. Just as the deposed god returns as a more repressive idol, the old undemanding bourgeois state reappears in the violence of the fascist collective. So we go to the state socialism that the Nazis have put in practice. Sade had already made the manual for them. It was, as the authors say, the philosophy of Sade that brought the downfall of Robespierre and Saint-Just during the French Revolution. Like the revolutionaries who were sent to the guillotine by the bourgeoisie were the victims of Sade. And so, of course, Sade was in prison too. The bourgeoisie was scandalized by his writings and censored it, but that's because Sade was depicting the bourgeoisie's real nature and real face. Quote, if the bourgeoisie sent them, its most loyal politicians, to the guillotine, it banished its most outspoken writer to the hell of the Bibliothèque Nationale. So the hell of Bibliothèque Nationale is a section in national libraries in France that are denied to the public and contained writing that were censored when published. So you'd have pornography, polemical pamphlets, etc. So the reason why the bourgeoisie censored Sade was the same reason it killed Robespierre. Both revealed the last, mythological veil it had on its face. So yes, the bourgeoisie never gets shy from executing its allies and members when they are about to reveal its nature. So the writings of Sade, the story of Justine and Juliet, are only confirming what the bourgeoisie been up to ever since the epics of Homer, using thought, reason as enlightenment to establish its power. And so his imprisonment was because the guy was a prophet who revealed where Western civilization was heading. He revealed that behind the veil of enlightenment lies no utopia, even if in his writings there are some utopian visions where, like these were actually eclipsed by the horrors of a society without any bounds, where murderers can kill without remorse. It is not the harmonious social ideal which even Sade glimpsed dimly in the future. Gardez vos frontières et restez chez vous. It is not even the socialist utopia developed in the story of Zame. It is the fact that Sade did not leave it to its enemies to be horrified by the Enlightenment, which makes his work pivotal to its rescue. So the first sentence, gardez vos frontières, restez chez vous, in French, stay within your frontiers and stay home, comes from La philosophie dans le boudoir. It's a series of dialogue imagined by Sade, where he sketches what his libertine society would look like. So that phrase is taken from the sixth dialogue. There are seven dialogues in the book, and in the specific passage of the dialogue, he is talking about what to do once the French have driven the invading enemy, the German, France and the Holy Roman Empire, as it was called back then, the Prussians, both were constantly, at each other's throats. So once the enemy is driven out of France, Sade tells the French to stay in France and try not to invade the empire back. And so he tells them to just focus on their land, to dynamize the economy by trade and industry, to encourage agriculture and make high arts, etc. So in short, to be autonomous, and they will see that kings and priests will crumble by themselves. So as for the other reference, the story of Zame, that's from the second volume of Aline et Valcourt. In it, you have the contrast between two kingdoms. One is a dystopia. It's the kingdom. It's a kingdom in Africa called Butua, where it's all violence and murder in daylight. And then you have a utopia in Oceania called Tamoe, and it's led by Zame. And Zame is like a philosopher king in his kingdom. His kingdom is prosperous and virtuous, and everyone is free to do what they want, but it never escalates into violence. And so these instances of utopian societies in Sade are like, the accident in his philosophy. The point that the authors make is that when we apply the philosophy of Sade, what is more likely to occur isn't the utopias in Aline Valcourt or in the La philosophie dans le boudoir, but rather it is going to be the fascist regimes of the 20th century. And well, it is precisely for this reason that Sade's work must be read. It is essentially to understand Enlightenment so that we can rescue reason. The thinkers who by Adorno and Horkheimer are referred to as the dark writers of Enlightenment, Sade and Nietzsche, they had more revealing things to say about Enlightenment than its straightforward advocators. That's because, as they say, the dark writers of the bourgeoisie, unlike its apologists, did not seek to avert the consequences of the Enlightenment with harmonistic doctrines. They did not pretend that formalistic reason had a closer affinity to morality than to immorality. So harmonic societies and utopias weren't really their concern, like they were the real figures of Enlightenment because of that. Others like Kant, who trusted in Enlightenment to bring in harmony and morality, were, so to speak, cowards who didn't dare to follow reason all the way. So what Sade and Nietzsche demonstrated was that reason doesn't care about harmony, doesn't care about beauty or morality as much as it would, about chaos, ugliness, and immorality. Reason can bring either, but in its essence, reason is about pragmatism, and pragmatism is about bringing about what is easier to bring about. If it is immorality that is easier to bring about, and since it can be, as much aligned with reason than morality, then there is no justification for not bringing it about. Reason, therefore, must bring about immorality and chaos, since it is easier to bring it about. So the dark writers of bourgeois societies were the bearer of the dark and harsh cold truth about reason and civilization. That truth is nothing more than vice gets rewarded, virtue gets punished. A quote from Juliet is straightforward here. It is by Lady Clairville, another character, who says that heaven rewards lustful murders. Quote, "Into hands stained by the murder of spouses and children, sodomy, killing, prostitution, and infamy, heaven has placed these riches to reward me for such abominations." And so this is the lesson of the dark writers of Enlightenment. Follow vices and you will be rewarded. Vice is the essence of the world and of existence. That's why human beings were made, not to be virtuous, but to rape and kill, to establish the worst kind of dominance over others. And so in this essence, there is no limits to what rulers can do, since it may sound that this is like, sure, it may sound like this is an exaggeration, but that is the point. Like for the dark writers of the bourgeoisie, only exaggeration is true. Once you reach the cap of there is no truth, why put any limits now, right? So Enlightenment is basically a limit breaker on cruelty. Its point is to produce the most of what's already existence. If the essence of existence is cruelty, then Enlightenment's goal is to produce the most of cruelty. And as such, truth will be the exception. As the mechanism of Enlightenment is activated, its constituents will engage in a competition. The bourgeois individuals lead a competition to know who gets to be the cruelest, who exaggerates the most, who exaggerates even their exaggeration, who gets, to produce the evilest laugh, if you want. And so it is in this paradigm of exception that the barbarism of prehistory reemerges in Enlightenment. The most advanced individual is the one who acts like the worst and oldest savage. The essential character of prehistory is the appearance of utmost horror in the individual detail, a statistical compilation of those slaughtered in a pogrom, which also induces mercy killings, conceals its essence, which emerges only in an exact the exact description of the exception, the most hideous torture. So in other words, the point of cruelty isn't just in its, consequences or in the numbers, like how many, people have you slaughtered. You can kill tens of thousands of people, that won't really count as cruelty, since statistics don't really show how the killing was done. If you also kill people out of mercy, it doesn't really make you as cruel as you can be. So torturing a baby in the most inhumane way can make you crueler than the dictator who organizes, mass genocide. And so the point is to be as cruel as possible, to perform the most hideous torture. That's where prehistory makes its appearance. The asterisk on prehistory in the footnote sends us back to another asterisk on page 31 of the book. That is in the concept of enlightenment, when we were talking about pre-socialist thinking. Like pre-socialist thinking is, if you remember from the last section of concept of enlightenment, it's when reason is itself illusory. Like reason claims that it is liberating us from the state of nature, and reason is necessary for that reason. But as we've seen, reason has replaced nature with an even more oppressive system, which makes its necessity illusory. So the more violent the world gets, the more visible prehistory nature appears in reason, and it culminates in just one exceptional detail, one individual, perhaps the Führer, who incorporates that prehistory that made its comeback. Or perhaps it's Netanyahu today. So now, sure, as the authors point, the bourgeois rulers didn't kill their spouses or kids or engage in prostitution and sodomy as much as their subjects. Those are activities that we often find in economically vulnerable areas. But like we said, when the subjects do it, it's out of weakness. It's a sign of the lower classes are regressive, and that they are still living in prehistory. Whereas when the bourgeois do it, it's rational. But as soon as the rulers feel their power threatens, well, it's party time. When power was at stake, the rulers have piled up mountains of corpses, even in recent centuries. So during the 30s and the 40s, the fascists did just that. They killed the baby. Their actions alone made all the actions of the characters in Sade's novel they made them act like saints by comparison. Quote, compared to the mentality of and actions of the rulers under fascism, in which power has come fully into its own, the enthusiastic description of the life of Brisatesta, although those rulers are recognized in its pales to harmless banality. In Sade, as in Mandeville, private vices are the anticipatory historiography of public virtues in the totalitarian era. So Brisatesta is another character from Juliet, another psychopath among many sadist libertines, and Mandeville, if you remember, is the guy who wrote The Fable of the Bees. Private vices make the public virtues. So yeah, that led to totalitarianism. The fundamental principle of totalitarianism is that you cannot derive from reason any argument against murder. Thus, anything that is utopian must be exposed. In utopias, there is no murdering, no raping, no stealing, but that would be impossible since no one would be able to explain why they are not murdering and raping each other. So it will lead to contradiction or the involvement of some sort of metaphysical superstition or lies. And so the project of Nietzsche and Sade was precisely this: to lay bare of all utopian thought disguised as reason, to the point of revoking even reason itself. As they say in the end of the Excursus, Adorno and Horkheimer write, in proclaiming the identity of power and reason, their pitiless doctrines are more compassionate than those of the moral lackeys of the bourgeoisie. Where are thy greatest dangers? Nietzsche once asked in pity. With his denial, he redeemed the unwavering trust in humanity, which day by day is betrayed by consoling affirmation. Okay, so the quote is from Aphorism 271 from the Gay Science, and so yeah, so that's it. That's the second excursus. We just went through everything, and yeah. So the point is that enlightenment is just a call for cruelty. And that's how that's the whole reasoning behind it, and that's how you got the two world wars. That's how you got colonialism and all of that. And it is a sort of thought that that is, in the history of the bourgeoisie ever since its, even like in its predecessor, like the entire fabric of Western civilization is based on the reasoning of the bourgeoisie, which dates back to Homer, and we talked about Homer enough in the first excursus. So that's it. I hope that you find it interesting and that it was helpful for you. Next week we're going to start reading from the chapter on anti-Semitism, and it's going to be a controversial essay. So I guess I will see you next week, and as always, thanks.